I am starting a series called Could That Kill Me?, where I talk about all of the household items that could possibly kill you. Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do any illegal things on my behalf. Now let's start with mixing cleaners. And today we're going to talk about mixing bleach and ammonia. Ammonia is a chemical that is typically in things like Windex or wood cleaners. Some multi-purpose cleaners also have ammonia in it. And if you mix that with bleach, you may think it's a good idea because it'll, clean things faster. But actually, it's a terrible idea. Mainly because whenever you mix bleach and ammonia, you can create chlorine gas. And chlorine gas in large quantities can actually kill you. In large enough quantities, chlorine gas could cause coughing, as well as chest pain and excessive tearing in the eyes. But extremely large amounts could be fatal. Chlorine gas could also be created if you mix vinegar with bleach, so just don't mix them. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Today we're going to be talking about napalm. This is me making napalm, or a form of napalm. Basically, I put 100% acetone and styrofoam together. And that's a way to make it, but most people would make it with gasoline and styrofoam. And napalm is basically this sticky gel-like substance that is very flammable. I'm talking chemical warfare flammable, okay? Even slight contact with napalm can cause second-degree burns. And with how dangerous it is so bad that you can make it with simple household items. Once again, don't do this. It could very, very much hurt you and be very, very fatal. But yeah, also the fumes aren't great either. They're pretty deadly as well. So yeah, just don't mess with it. Welcome to our third episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. If you like fruit, raise your hand because this one's for you, especially if you like cherries. Basically, cherry pits could kill you. Yes, ingesting the pit of a cherry could kill you. Basically, a typical cherry pit contains 0.17 grams of cyanide. It takes 0.1 grams of cyanide to kill an average 150-pound person. Now mind you, the dosage of cyanide within every cherry pit varies a little. So if you don't die after the first one, you may die after the second, but why would you take the risk? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, have you ever heard the term, don't eat green potatoes? If so, listen to it because that person's right. Just don't eat green potatoes. The green parts of the potato contains a poison called solanine. And it's a poison that's typically found in the nightshade family. And if eaten in large quantities, solanine can actually kill you. So just stay away from green potatoes. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. You probably have this thing in your pantry, and they're dried kidney beans. Yep, dried kidney beans. Basically, raw kidney beans that have not been boiled yet contain lectins, and if you eat about 4 to 5 raw kidney beans, you can experience extreme nausea and vomiting within 1 to 3 hours of consuming those 4 to 5 raw kidney beans. Mainly because the lectins in 4 to 5 raw kidney beans are a toxic amount for your body. So yeah, just boil them, dude, boil them. Once you boil the kidney beans, you're fine, and the lectins basically just dissolve. So yeah, don't take raw kidney beans as an afternoon snack. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Players, this one's for you. You could be turned into some real-life murderers. And I say that because people can actually die of a broken heart. This is called broken heart syndrome, also called stress-induced cardiomyopathy, and it is a medical condition that occurs after a stressful event, such as death of a loved one, a serious accident, traumatic events, even a breakup. And you can experience broken heart syndrome even if you have no signs or history of heart disease, or any heart conditions for that matter. Now, in most cases, broken heart syndrome is very, very easily treatable. However, there have been cases that have proved to be fatal. So yeah, stop breaking people's hearts just for fun, because it could actually kill them. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's talk about eating styrofoam, why would you do this? Don't eat styrofoam, don't do it. No, styrofoam is not toxic, it's not poisonous, but it is an inflated polystyrene and it doesn't digest. So eating a small amount can actually break off in your esophagus and cause breathing problems, or it could cause a blockage in your digestive tract because it can't digest. So if you eat a small piece of styrofoam, it'll come out the other end looking exactly the same. There have been instances where people have eaten large amounts of styrofoam, and it's not only caused nutritional deficiencies, but they also had to get surgery because they had a huge intestinal blockage due to the styrofoam not being digested. So yeah, don't eat styrofoam. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Let's talk about drinking gasoline for a minute. Yeah, this would definitely hurt you and kill you. Basically, gasoline contains about 150 different types of chemicals, and those chemicals include methane and benzene, which are hydrocarbons that can cause something known as gasoline poisoning. You can simply harm yourself just by having gasoline on your skin for a long period of time. Yes, it can harm your skin. But when you drink gasoline, it can actually cause severe damage to your major organs. Simply from inhalation, gasoline poisoning can cause symptoms like burning in the esophagus, vision loss, and even extreme convulsions. So consuming gasoline is extremely deadly. Even if you swallowed very small amounts of gasoline, it can cause extremely harmful effects to your internal organs. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, eating pencil lead. One, I wouldn't recommend because, there's so many better things to eat. But as far as the risk factor, it's very mild. At most, pencil lead is a choking hazard, which is risky still. But as far as poison, no. Mainly because pencil lead is not actually lead. It's graphite, which is pretty non-toxic and safe. But yeah, just don't eat pencil lead, you doofus. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. For many health nuts out there, water is super important, but did you know that you can actually induce water intoxication if you drink too much water? Basically, water intoxication, or water poisoning, is a disruption of brain function caused by drinking too much water. This increases the amount of water in your blood, which dilutes the electrolytes in your blood. This can induce symptoms such as headaches and vomiting, in more severe cases, increased blood pressure and having trouble breathing, and overall it can increase the pressure in your skull, which could be fatal. So yeah, don't drink 6 liters of water, please. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's talk about benzoic acid. If you don't know what benzoic acid is, it is actually basically in everything that we eat. Namely fruits. Some fruits create benzoic acid naturally, and others don't, but still have benzoic acid in them. But basically, in very small doses, benzoic acid is non-toxic. However, if you got a high enough dosage, yeah, it could be poisonous, but it's very unlikely that you would eat enough fruit to get a high enough dosage to have benzoic acid poisoning. So, no. I mean, unless you drink a whole gallon of benzoic acid, but where the hell would you find that, and why would you do that? After an extremely long hiatus, welcome to another episode of Can That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. You know the drill. Today, I wanted to talk about radium. Basically, in the 1900s, radium was discovered and oftentimes used in glow-in-the-dark paints because of the fact that it was really, really cool and glowy and awesome. These paints were then oftentimes used to paint watch dials and clocks. And like most things in history, it was deemed as safe and then quickly turned into horror. Especially for the people who were painting those watch dials and clocks with the radium paint, which were the radium girls most of the time. These girls were told that radium was safe for them, and they would even do things such as lick the end of their paintbrush to make it pointy. And that caused these girls to get radium poisoning and endure crazy side effects such as nausea, vomiting, tooth decay, and even one of them had their lower jaw fall off. So yeah, next time you're in an antique shop and you see a clock, I wouldn't recommend buying it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's talk about a method that a lot of serial killers have used that can obviously, make you go, eh. But I kind of want to explain more about why. Many serial killers, such as Robert Pickton and a lot of others, have basically murdered their victims by injecting antifreeze into their bloodstream. Now, why does this kill people? Probably because antifreeze is 50% ethylene glycol, And that causes a great thing we like to call antifreeze poisoning. Antifreeze poisoning is mainly caused by the metabolites in ethylene glycol, such as oxalate, glycolate, things like that. Now, you probably don't know what those words mean, but these metabolites basically inhibit things such as respiration, protein synthesis, and DNA replication, things that are important. And if untreated, all of these inhibitions at once can cause death because, your body's not working at all properly. So yeah, don't mess with antifreeze. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's go on with it. So I get a lot of book questions from writers, and this one was very interesting to me, so let's talk about it. Now, I saw another comment underneath this one that was replying with either lead or arsenic. Now, here's the thing. Toxicologists can sniff out lead or arsenic in an instant. They would know that that was not a natural death. However, one thing that's very, very hard to detect in toxicology is thallium sulfate. Now, thallium is a metal that is used for a lot of different things, including manufacturing electronics and optical lenses, such as these glasses right here. But upon injection or inhalation, thallium can affect your nervous system, heart, lungs, all of these organs. And if dosed in large amounts within short periods of time, it can lead to death. And it's not impossible to find on a toxicology report, but it is way harder than detecting lead or arsenic. Welcome to another episode of Can That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. The answer to this question is yes, and it is called mad honey, or often referred to as mad honey. Anyway, when bees harvest pollen from certain types of flowers, such as rhododendron and Andromeda flowers, that pollen can actually contain a neurotoxin called granotoxin. And basically that granotoxin can make honey poisonous for humans. And this honey that's poisonous for human, also known as mad honey, like I said before, can cause paralysis and even death. So yeah, watch where your honey comes from. Not any known assassins, but there was a former KGB agent in 2006 who died from a really insane thing. On that note, welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's talk about this former KGB agent. Anyway, so out of nowhere, this man fell really ill on November 1st of 2006. And this was only a few hours after he was having tea with a few former agents. His hair started falling out, his organs started shutting down, a lot of crazy shit started happening. And for the entire time he's dying, the doctors at London's University College Hospital have no idea what is happening. So they send this information over to the scientists at Britain's top nuclear research site, and these scientists found that this man's tea contained polonium-210, which is a particle that was used in some of the first nuclear bombs. And it is very, very deadly. And only 23 days after being admitted, this man passed away. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. I have a piece of fuzz in my hair. Today I want to talk about something called ricin, and if you don't know what ricin is, it is basically a waste product that is produced whenever castor oil is made. You know, castor oil that you were told to put on your eyelashes to make them grow. Yeah, that. And ricin, ricin is very, very toxic. And there is no cure for ricin poisoning either. Now, ricin can cause a whole bunch of things, such as if you inhale it, it can cause pulmonary edema, also known as fluid buildup in your lungs. God damn, that construction's loud. I digress. Upon inhalation, it can also cause you turning blue, as well as just a bunch of respiratory issues. And upon ingestion, it can cause a lot of things such as organ failure, as well as diarrhea and vomiting that could become bloody. And this is all because of the fact that ricin will get into your cells and basically make it to where they can't make the proteins that they need to in order to survive. So they just die. So yeah, don't get near ricin. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's go. So I don't know of any poisonings that would actually liquefy your organs. However, I do know some poisonings that would cause you to cough up blood, and here's one of them. Sulfuric acid poisoning. Now, sulfuric acid has a pH balance of about 2 to 3, which means it's super acidic and very, very highly dangerous. And this stuff can be easily found in car battery acid, as well as some detergents and even some fertilizers, and even the occasional toilet bowl cleaner. And basically, one of the symptoms whenever sulfuric acid is inhaled is coughing up a lot of blood. You know, along with coughing and dizziness and shortness of breath and a lot of symptoms. And basically, there's no cure for it. The symptoms are just treated so that you don't die from the symptoms. But overall, sulfuric acid is very dangerous, and I do not highly recommend inhaling it or swallowing it or touching it for that matter. Don't do anything with it. Did you know that there is a plant that can unalive people while still leaving a smile on their face? Welcome to another episode of Can That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Thank you to this commenter for bringing this up to me. So yes, the plant is called water dropwort, and it causes people to smile after they die. Now, why is this? For one, the smile is called a sardonic grin, and the term was coined because people historically from Phoenician Sardinia would dispose of people using water dropwort. Now, why does this plant cause a ritualistic death smile? The reason being is because the plant, or the poison from the plant, basically causes all of the muscles in one's body to constrict, which ultimately causes the victim to asphyxiate. And the muscle constriction, while causing people to asphyxiate, also leaves them with this deadly, really creepy grin. Not to mention, water dropwort is just one of the most deadly plants in the kingdom. Wouldn't mess with it. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. You, come here. Do you smoke or vape? If the answer is yes, then you're probably very aware of something called nicotine. And yes, nicotine can kill you. In fact, there have been many reports of children, adolescents, even grown adults being unalived after touching a tobacco plant. Simply touching the tobacco plant can maim you. And that is because of the fact that the nicotine from the tobacco plant very easily can seep through your skin and cause nicotine poisoning. Now, why haven't people just, kind of croaked after taking one hit of their vape or something? That is because whenever you are smoking it, you only get a very small fraction of nicotine, so it is way less likely that you're going to get nicotine poisoning from hitting one. But it is still not the best for you. So yeah, I'd recommend not wrapping yourself in a tobacco plant or really any nicotine substance. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Also, I will be taking a hiatus due to surgery for the next few days, but I will be back and at it in no time. Anyway, yesterday we talked about water dropwort. Today we are going to talk about white snake root, which is an extremely poisonous flower and overall plant. Basically, white snake root is very toxic to both livestock and humans, and can very easily cause death. In fact, it is actually the plant that killed Abraham Lincoln's mother, Nancy Lincoln. How did it do that? She drank milk from a cow who grazed on it. Basically, this plant is toxic to both humans and livestock, but humans can actually die from the toxic plant by not eating the plant itself. They don't have to do that, but consuming either the milk or the meat of livestock who grazed on it. So if you have white snake root in your pastures, would highly recommend not eating beef or dairy. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's go. I just want to give props to the House production team, by the way. House MD was super freaking accurate. At least in this episode. I haven't watched all of the episodes. Basically, there's a treatment for rheumatoid arthritis called gold therapy. And on top of being used as a treatment, gold can be considered, a heavy metal that can poison you. Upon ingestion of a large amount, it can cause things like vomiting. It can also cause headaches, internal bleeding, and jaundice. And overall, it's just not a fun time. And yes, they even got right that if you mix stannous chloride with gold, it will turn a bright purple color. So House MD was pretty accurate on this one. And yes, like any other heavy metal, an overexposure to gold, especially if ingested, can kill you. There are actually poisons that don't show up on autopsy reports. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now you're probably wondering, what is one of the poisons that doesn't show up on an autopsy report? And that poison is succinylcholine, which is an extreme muscle relaxant. In fact, there was a paper actually written in 1996 in Tokyo that talks about a serial killer who used succinylcholine, 40 milligrams to be exact, and basically the serial killer took out their victims with darts full of 40 milligrams of succinylcholine, which is in fact a lethal amount. This caused things such as apnea and pulmonary edema, which is also known as fluid buildup in your lungs. And the only way the police knew that it was succinylcholine was because 1, there was a puncture site in each victim from the darts, and 2, one of the darts was actually found with succinylcholine in it, but it never showed up on an autopsy report. It took a long time to find this one, but I have an answer for you. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. I had to search far and wide for this answer. And the closest match to what I can come up with is a medication called levodopa, which is oftentimes combined with carbidopa in order to treat Parkinson's disease or as a medication for Parkinson's disease. Now here's my reasoning why. Your skin can turn white from a multitude of different things, one of which being reduced red blood cell count. And what destroys red blood cells? You guessed it, levodopa. Not to mention, according to this PubMed article from 1989, levodopa does in fact cause hallucinations, and the hallucinations in fact did not discriminate against any age group. So in this case specifically, if you want in your book for people's bodies to turn white as they hallucinate and eventually pass away, then levodopa is your answer. This took forever to find, but welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now for this question, I actually have two answers. The first way you could do this is through liquid carbon dioxide or, liquid dry ice. And that is because of the fact that whenever you submerge organic matter in carbon dioxide, liquid carbon dioxide, it is so cold that it would cause the water vapor around the body to condense, kind of creating like a cloud effect around the body, which would then cause you to have vapor or mist around the body. Now mind you, the body would also be like frozen, like completely frozen solid. So the person would have to be like submerged into this liquid carbon dioxide. Another way is to submerge them into liquid bromine because of the fact that bromine has a very low vaporization threshold. And so as soon as it basically touches air, it'll turn into vapor. It's also super toxic, but I will say it would most likely dye the skin a rusty brown color. So it's very obvious that it was bromine. And this is where we get into the world of cyanide. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, we've all heard about cyanide poisoning. It's very, very popular among the poisonings that you hear of, but not a lot of people know anything at all about it, so let's talk about it. So cyanide can work pretty fast depending on the dosage. Typically 3 milligrams per liter within the blood is a dosage for death. And it can actually be caused by ingestion of cyanide, but it's most commonly caused by inhalation from smoke and fires and stuff like that. And cyanide poisoning causes a ton of things, such as vertigo, apnea, cardiac arrest. And you can find cyanide in many forms, mostly in cassava, as well as the seeds of apples, oranges, apricots. And you can even find them in almonds, which is why it is recommended not to eat too many almonds. But yeah, cyanide is pretty crazy. Why, there is in fact a chemical that can make your skin very scale-like. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. And that chemical is called desomorphine, also known as crocodile or the poor man's heroin or whatever other name that it's called on the street. It is in fact a street drug, and it's actually a semi-synthetic opioid that basically acts as a very, very fast-acting sedative, but it also induces other things, like skin necrosis, which is when the blood and oxygen to a certain part of the body are limited, causing the tissue in that area to die, and it causes a very black, dry, leathery skin on top of it. I'm not going to show you pictures because of the fact that it's very triggering, but if you want to look it up, go ahead. And to answer the burning question, could it kill me? Yes, it basically kills you from the inside out. Very nasty stuff. Have you ever wondered what the poisoning is that a ton of murder mysteries use to kill off characters? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. We all know a basic movie death that has to do with poisoning. It's typically the entire body convulses and then they end up dying really quickly. And this is typically at the hands of something called strychnine. Strychnine poisoning can basically be caused by the inhalation, ingestion, or just simply going in your eyes or something like that of strychnine. And after ingestion or inhalation, the poison takes about 10 to 20 minutes to actually affect your system. Now, once you start experiencing symptoms of strychnine poisoning, your body basically will start to convulse because all of your muscles will start to spasm uncontrollably. And people usually die of strychnine poisoning due to asphyxiation, which is caused by the paralysis of neural pathways in the body. And death usually occurs within 2 to 3 hours of ingesting or inhalation of strychnine. And this is why we never mess with the colorful plants. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now this is Delphinium elatum, also known as larkspur. And larkspur is typically poisonous through ingestion. However, larkspur has had some reports of burning your skin a little bit if you touch it, so I just wouldn't mess with it. But basically, larkspur is very poisonous upon ingestion by both livestock and humans. And after ingestion, it'll typically cause things such as nausea and vomiting, bloating, muscular spasms, and a lot of times even death. Like, this is the plant that caused a lot of livestock and cattle to die on the West Coast, or in the West area of the United States in general. And there is no known cure specifically for this poison. Like, there's no specific antidote, however. Patients in hospitals showing symptoms of this poisoning will typically be given a lot of fluids as well as atropine to combat hypotension. Let's talk about Aconitum napellus, also known as aconite, also known as monk's hood. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, this is aconite. It's a very, very beautiful flower. And yes, it is highly toxic. In fact, it can actually cause serious heart failure, along with the basic symptoms of poisoning, like numbing of the mouth, disturbances of your gastrointestinal tract, coordination, muscle weakness, and even vertigo. I'm wondering, since it's so toxic, how in the hell is it used in medicinal and herbal mixtures? And the answer is decoction. Basically, the toxicity of this plant in its raw state can actually be greatly reduced by something called decoction, which is basically whenever you concentrate the essence of a plant through heating or boiling, and it leaves you with this very concentrated liquid of the plant. Messing with certain things that could kill us can actually help us greatly. What if I told you that there was a poison that was originally thought to give you a higher sex drive? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Yes, and the poison is called cantharidin. So cantharidin is a poison that comes from the Spanish fly, which is not actually a fly, it's actually a species of blister beetle. And the cantharidin secretion from this blister beetle actually was originally used in order to increase sex drive, specifically in men. However, it is actually super, super dangerous. Basically what happens is the ingestion of cantharidin, even a very small amount of cantharidin, causes the poison to eat away at your stomach, which causes your stomach or abdominal cavity to fill with blood, which then inflames your urinary tract. And basically the reason that the myth that this gives you a higher sex drive as a man existed was because while the poison was eating away at your insides, it would cause a lot of inflammation, which would lead to men who were poisoned forming erections, and a very painful one at that. I never knew until today that in Chinese history they had a venomous animal fight club. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Basically, there is this poison from old Chinese history called gu. Like G-U, gu. And basically this poison was used for a lot of things, such as manipulating partners, as well as giving to other people to cause malignant diseases and even death. And it was used for all these things because of the fact that this poison took about 2 weeks to actually kill someone. So it gave people enough time to give the antidote to the person they were poisoning. And throughout this entire story, the most intriguing thing is how gu is made, which is basically where these people would put all of these venomous animals into one container and basically had them all fight to the death. And then the surviving animal, since it was thought to have all of these venoms and poisons in them from other animals that were trying to kill it, would be ground up in a paste and usually added to, like, people's food. So yeah, that's terrifying. Let's talk about biological warfare. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, one of the most lethal pieces of biological warfare that I have ever found is something called botulinum, which is a toxin naturally found in forest soils, at the bottoms of lakes and rivers, and even the intestinal tracts of some fish and animals. If inhaled, a gram of botulinum has actually been said to be able to kill about 1 million people. So that's terrifying. And basically, once you inhale botulinum or ingest it in any way, that causes botulism, which is basically the ongoing state of you just continuously becoming paralyzed, both in your respiratory and muscular systems, thus typically leading to asphyxiation. How do we know this? Well, during the occupation of Manchuria, a Japanese biological warfare group basically was said to infect war prisoners with botulinum. So yeah, I hope y'all liked this video because there's a lot more biological warfare left. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now let's talk about VX nerve gas. Basically, VX nerve gas was discovered in 1952, in which it was then sold as a pesticide called Amitin, and very, very quickly taken off of all of the shelves because it was deemed too dangerous for the public. After that, VX nerve gas actually got completely outlawed in 1993 by the Chemical Weapons Convention. Now, why did they ban this and why was it seen as too dangerous for humans? Because of the fact that this stuff can kill you within minutes. I'm talking with extreme exposure about 1 to 10 minutes and you're dunzo. Now, how does this stuff work exactly? For one, it can affect you in multiple different ways through ingestion, inhalation, even skin contact and eye contact. Eye contact as in like direct contact with your eyes. And what happens is, VX nerve gas actually inhibits the production of a certain enzyme in your nerves, which causes your nerves to then have constant activity and basically overwhelm your body. So yeah, not a great way to meet your maker. Imagine taking a pill to enhance your sexual performance just to get a heart attack that leads to later on. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So yeah, this has been known to happen with aphrodisiacs, such as ones called Rock Hard and Love Stone. I know, terrible names. And even a Chinese one called Chansu. And the reason being is that these aphrodisiacs all have one thing in common, and that is they contain the dried up toxic secretions of certain types of toads, specifically Asiatic or cane toads, and basically the secretions from these toads can cause heart attacks. Now, toad poisonings are very, very rare, but they are extremely life-threatening. And that is because these toad secretions contain a bunch of different bufadienolites, which are cardiotonic steroids, which while they have medicinal qualities, cardiotonic steroids can cause heart attacks if overdosed. So look up your aphrodisiacs a little before you take them. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So there's not a poison that really kills instantly, especially if you ingest it, just because of the fact that your digestive tract needs time for that ingested poison to hit your small intestine so it can be infused into your bloodstream. That's why whenever you're taking medication, pills typically take way longer to affect you than an injection would. However, there is a poison called sarin that upon inhalation can affect you after about a minute, and after about 5 to 10 minutes of exposure to sarin, it can actually kill you. But that's one of the fastest acting poisons that there is, at least to the public world. But yeah, whenever it comes to ingesting poisons, most of the time, it's gonna take way longer than if you inhale or inject it. So yeah, thank your digestive system for taking forever. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, if we're talking poisons, heavy metal poisonings have been reported to be some of the most painful types of poisonings. But if you're going for pain, I would start looking more into venoms, and here's why. Venom, as soon as it enters your body, actually will trigger your pain-sensing peripheral nerve endings, which will then express both a host of ion channels and receptors that are then targeted by certain components within the venom. So it's basically going to be much more painful than any poisoning. And most of the time, whenever even it comes to heavy metal poisonings, the majority of the pain is in your stomach and lower abdomen. Meanwhile, venoms are a whole different thing altogether. And most of the time, if you want venoms that cause paralysis, a lot of snake venoms will actually cause neuromuscular paralysis, which is what usually causes death if someone's bitten by a snake. At least a snake that's venomous, like a copperhead.
My hand in. No, they're chill.
This is a very special case of don't do things that you see on TikTok. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So the creatures in that video are called Glaucus atlanticus, also known as the blue glaucus. You should never, ever, ever touch these things. Mainly because of the fact that while they themselves are not venomous, their diet consists of a lot of venomous animals such as the Portuguese man of war. And whenever they consume these venomous animals, they can actually swallow the venomous nematocysts that are within these animals and store those nematocysts in their little wing look-alike finger things called serrata, but no one knows them as that. They know them as the wing look-alike finger things, which can cause a painful sting, and like in the video I just stitched, can land you in the hospital. I would highly recommend not bothering any of these things. And especially don't bother animals that are bright blue and look like Pokemon. I would be cautious the next time you go seashell hunting. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. This is called a cone snail, and if you see one of them while you're seashell hunting, do not pick them up. Mainly because of the fact that you could get your hand harpooned with this little proboscis, and it is not a fun time to say the least. Symptoms of envenomation from cone snails can range from just intense pain, numbness, tingling of the sight, all the way to more severe cases, such as muscle paralysis, blurred and doubled vision, and even respiratory paralysis, which can lead to death. Now, not all cone snails are toxic to humans, but safe to say I would not test the waters on this one. Either way, getting stabbed by one of these things is a pretty unpleasant experience and would ruin a good beach day anytime. Did you know coral can actually hurt you? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So yeah, there are certain species of coral that can actually really hurt you. One of which is fire coral. Basically, fire coral has something called nematocysts on them, which are these little hair-like structures. And if you've heard the word nematosis before, that's probably from the blue glaucus video that I did a few days back. But yeah, same type of nematosis. And basically when you brush up against this coral, those nematosis shoot out venom. And that venom is very painful and causes a very, very big burning sensation. Just not a fun time at the beach. But could it kill you? Not really. It's just very painful. Now there is a fungi that's called fire coral though that can kill you. But two separate things. I'm only gonna say this once. Put the stonefish down. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Wow, I botched that. Anyway, let's go on. So in that video, we just saw someone handling a stonefish. Now, stonefish have the title of the most venomous fish in the sea, so I would not mess with them. However, the good thing is that how you were holding the stonefish, you would not have been harmed. Still wouldn't mess with them though. Basically, typically whenever a stonefish is usually stepped on because people think it is a stone, it'll raise its dorsal fins upon pressure and release varicotoxins, also known as VTX. And this venom can cause a lot of respiratory issues, along with damage to your cardiovascular system and convulsions and paralysis and probably asphyxiation due to paralysis. It's bad. However, because of how you were holding it in the video, you weren't holding it by its back or pressing on its back. So thankfully it didn't hurt you, but be careful. So we all know that opioids are extremely dangerous for a lot of people, mainly because of the fact that they are highly addictive and oftentimes lead to overdoses. But let's get more into the specifics of that. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Today I want to talk about fentanyl, mainly because of the fact that not only is it a really cool opioid and really highly dangerous, but it is also actually synthetically made in comparison to other opioids, which are typically made from poppies. So oftentimes, deaths occur from fentanyl due to overdose because of the fact that you need a very, very small amount of fentanyl to actually reap the effects of it, which is why in the drug dealing world, it is considered a very, very cheap but efficient option, and why a lot of other drugs are actually laced with fentanyl. But this makes it to where it's very, very easy to overdose on fentanyl because, like I said before, you need a very, very low amount of fentanyl to actually reap the effects of it, but that low amount can very, very easily turn into an overdose. So yeah, don't mess with opioids, just don't do it. Since TikTok is still not banned, let's talk about more science with another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. We're getting into some bioterrorism on this one whenever I talk about anthrax. So anthrax is a disease caused by a spore-forming bacteria called anthrax is a disease caused by a spore-forming bacteria called Bacillus anthracus, and it was actually used for some bioterrorism in 2001, in which Bacillus anthracus spores were actually mailed and distributed all throughout the US postal system in little envelopes. This caused 22 cases of anthrax, followed by 5 deaths. And it's mostly because of the fact that the inhalation of Bacillus anthracus can cause the most severe symptoms of anthrax. So be careful next time you get your mail. Did you know that in US history, authorities used to use truth serums to interrogate prisoners? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Today I'm going to talk about scopolamine, which is one of the many truth serums that have been used in certain interrogations, especially in the US. Now, scopolamine is a synthetic alkaloid that is used as medication typically for things like motion sickness. However, it has been used as a truth serum, mainly because of the fact that scopolamine itself can be used as an anesthetic, or a type of anesthetic. And in the 1920s, a doctor named Dr. Robert House actually tested scopolamine out as a truth serum, and what he found was that it put his patients into a twilight sleep in which they would actually tell him the truth about mostly everything. Mainly because of the fact that in this twilight sleep, it is very hard for a human to cognitively create a lie. However, there also have been overdoses of scopolamine that can cause asphyxiation. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf, no matter how tempting it might be in this current climate. Now, we've all heard of deadly viruses such as Ebola, but the most deadly virus in the world is called the Marburg virus, and it spreads from an animal host to humans through contact from animal hosts to humans, at least in most cases. And not only is the Marburg virus deadly, but it's pretty hard to diagnose. Not to mention it takes quite a bit, that being 2 to 21 days after exposure, for you to get symptoms. Now, the initial symptoms are basic things such as sore throat, diarrhea, maybe some chest pain and vomiting. Then it gets increasingly more severe. You can get inflammation, severe weight loss, which is not a good thing, jaundice, delirium, and a large amount of hemorrhaging, not to mention multi-organ dysfunction. And the fatality rate for Marburg virus is 23 to 90%. So let's not. Ah yes, the self-poisoning by sodium nitrite. This trend of self-poisoning with sodium nitrite has actually been going up since like 2017. Basically, it's the deliberate ingestion of sodium nitrite, which is an oxidizing agent commonly found in certain meats, as well as processed fish, cheeses, as well as a preservative, an antimicrobial, and a food coloring agent. And it can very easily be confused for salt or granulated sugar. Symptoms include anything from headaches, nausea, fatigue, all the way to loss of consciousness, dizziness, and even a blue coloration in your lips and skin. That is, if you take too much. And of course, an overdose of sodium nitrite can easily lead to death. So this is just a reminder, if you have a friend who's talking about unaliving themselves, or even if you see other signs, please redirect them with the hotline down below, because sadly, deliberately self-poisoning with sodium nitrite is not an uncommon occurrence. It has been a little bit, but welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, this one is one that you have most likely consumed today. In fact, every one of you has probably consumed this at least once in your life or once a day in your life. And that is salt. Yes, salt poisoning is a thing, because there can be too much of a good thing. Now, salt poisoning is typically rare in adults, seeing as you would need a large amount of salt to do so. Anywhere from half a gram to 1 gram per kilograms of body weight that you have of salt would be needed. However, salt poisoning, whenever it does happen, basically occurs like this. You consume a very, very, very large amount of salt, and as soon as you consume all that salt, our best friend osmosis does its job. Osmosis being whenever the water in your cells travels to an area of particle concentration. In this case, it's traveling to the area of salt concentration to dilute it. And that lack of water in your cells can kill you. Okay, let's talk aconite. So aconite, also known as wolfsbane, is a very poisonous plant. It can poison you through contact if you have any open wounds. However, most of the time it is poisonous through ingestion. And the reason it's poisonous is because aconite has an alkaloid inside of it called aconitine. Now here's the thing. As little as 0.2 grams of aconitine is enough to poison you. Most of the time that poisoning would be giving you a stomachache, because most poisonings make it to where the body wants to excrete that poison. However, if you consumed 2 grams of aconitine alkaloid, it is enough to be fatal, which is a very small amount. Now, whenever it's enough to be fatal, aconite basically kills you by acting as a paralytic and basically slowing down your respiratory and heart functions. So in short, aconite basically paralyzes your internal organs, which is terrifying. But like, if it's so deadly, why is it so pretty? So, it's possible for carrot juice to be able to kill you. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So we all know that having too much of a good thing is not ever a good thing. And this lesson was definitely learned a little bit too late by a man named Basil Brown, who was a health food enthusiast in London in 1997. This man went on a 10-day juice cleanse where he only drank a gallon of carrot juice a day. This culminated into him consuming around 70 million units of vitamin A within this period. This caused him to experience something called vitamin A toxicity. Now, vitamin A toxicity can cause anything from headache to blurry vision all the way to seizures. So ultimately, because Basil Brown decided to consume so much vitamin A, this man overdosed on vitamin A as well as suffered severe liver damage and ultimately died. After a lot of silence, welcome back to another episode of Can That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Today we're going to talk about lily of the valley. Now, lily of the valley, despite what it looks like, is actually not a flower, but it actually shares the same family as asparagus, which is kind of funny. And this plant is extremely toxic. Basically, you can touch it and you can, move it to certain places without it hurting you. However, if you ingest any part of this plant, including flowers, leaves, stem, anything, it is extremely, extremely toxic. Basically, this plant contains a lot of compounds that are problematic for your heart specifically. And while these compounds in very, very minute doses are used in some medication, and I'm talking very minute, like minuscule, eating one of these things can cause you cardiac arrest as well as death. So despite it being a part of the asparagus family, I would not consider eating it like asparagus. Did you know that you're more likely to get killed by a snail than you are by shark attacks, tiger attacks, crocodiles, tapeworms, and a lot of other things? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. But yeah, you should probably watch out for freshwater snails. These bad boys are the cause of around 4,400 fatalities per year. That is because they transmit a deadly parasitic disease called schistosomiasis. Schistosomiasis is caused by little parasitic worms that these things transmit, and those little worms love to cause a lot of issue. Now, schistosomiasis is mainly seen in South America as well as Africa and Asia, so Europeans and North Americans, you are usually safe. But once freshwater snails transmit that disease, you'll most likely experience pain in your abdomen, joints, and muscles, and symptoms can include bloating, gastrointestinal bleeding, slowed development, blood in your urine. It can even cause infertility, weight loss, and death. So beware in the freshwaters of South America, Asia, and Africa. So this is not the type of information that you would want to include in a strongly worded email to your florist, but let's talk about it. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, I searched far and wide for poisonous flowers, namely flowers that are toxic when either inhaled or touched. And the one that I came across the most was Jimson weed. Now, Jimson weed is extremely poisonous whenever ingested, but it's also extremely dangerous to inhale. You know, whenever you get close to a flower and you want to smell it because it smells great. Yeah, don't do that with this plant. Now, a lot of the time, Jimson weed is purchased to actually create hallucinogenic drugs, and that is how a lot of people will get poisoned by this plant. However, it contains a lot of dangerous chemicals like atropine and scopolamine, which if you don't know what scopolamine is a very, very dangerous chemical that's sometimes used as a DR drug. But symptoms include increased heart rate, as well as extreme fever, increased blood pressure, neurological issues, and death. What if I told you it can actually kill someone using the wine itself? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Also, I don't know why this video originally got deleted. I don't know what happened, but we're making it again. So basically, in wine making or alcohol making in general, during the fermentation process, if the fruit that you're making the alcohol out of has pectin in it, then during the fermentation process, that pectin actually turns into something called methanol. Not to be confused with ethanol, which is the thing in alcoholic beverages that cause you to get drunk. Methanol, on the other hand, is very, very dangerous and can actually cause death. And methanol is also why your neighbor Terry over there should not be making alcohol in his kitchen at 2 a.m. without doing research beforehand. That is because after the fermentation process, whenever the pectin turns into methanol, you have another process that can get rid of the methanol called distillation. Now, distillation also enhances the ethanol in the mixture, so it actually makes the ABV go up. And most of the time, wine is not distilled because there's a very low amount of methanol in wine because grapes don't have that much pectin in them. There is, however, a modified method of distillation that can be used with wine called a methanol slice method. But the real question is, how do you kill the king in your story? Basically, what you would do is instead of making grape wine, your chefs would make plum wine because plum has way more pectin in it, so that means that during the fermentation process, that pectin will turn into way more methanol. And just don't do anything to get rid of the methanol. Like, forget the methanol slicing method or any form of distillation, period. And in that case, if the victim drinks enough, say an entire bottle, he most likely might not wake up the next morning. Have you ever thought of killing off a fictional character with a salad? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, some people like to put mushrooms in salads, me being one of them. However, if you put the wrong mushroom in a salad, even if it's a cooked mushroom, it could potentially end your life. I introduced the death cap mushroom, which despite being inside of the category is not actually a fun guy. He's actually pretty terrifying. The death cap mushroom will oftentimes resemble Caesar's mushrooms as well as edible straw mushrooms, and contains amatoxins that, if consumed, can cause death pretty quickly. And the amatoxins in the death cap mushroom are pretty heat resistant, so even if you cook it, they are still there. And that death cap mushroom is still just as dangerous as if it was raw. Within 6 to 12 hours of consuming this thing, you will experience abdominal pain as well as vomiting, as well as a rapid loss of fluids from your tissues and intense thirst. And amongst all of the cases of ingesting the death cap mushroom, over 50% of those cases resulted in coma and death. So don't try it. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. While it might still be summertime, I want to prepare y'all well in advance. So before Thanksgiving gets here, did you know that eggnog and pumpkin pie, if you eat too much of it, could possibly kill you? As well as any other food that contains nutmeg. Namely because nutmeg takes a very small amount to actually become toxic to a person. I'm talking like 2 teaspoons worth of nutmeg can be considered toxic to. And that is because nutmeg contains one of the main ingredients called myristicin or myristicin. I have no idea how to say it, let's just go on. And large amounts of myristicin taken can cause things such as tachycardia, as well as nausea, vomiting, and yes, hallucinations, because nutmeg, due to its main ingredient myristicin, is actually considered a hallucinogen. But yeah, overall, not a fun way to spend the holidays. So if you're already making your Thanksgiving dinner plans, might want to keep that in mind. Did you know rock collecting can be deadly? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So yeah, geologists beware, especially if you are the type to put rocks in your mouth to determine the grit size. Because there's one specific rock that I'm thinking of right now that can kill you upon inhalation or ingestion. And that rock is called Hutchinsonite. Now you're probably just looking at this picture and thinking that is simply a rock. However, upon inhaling or ingesting this rock, even in the smallest amounts, you could be signing yourself up for some pretty bad heavy metal poisoning. And that is because the composition of Hutchinsonite includes 3 very deadly minerals, those being arsenic, lead, and thallium. Thankfully, it is a very rare mineral that is only found in a few specific countries. However, if you are unlucky enough to be affected by Hutchinsonite, you will very quickly experience symptoms of heavy metal poisoning, including chills, abdominal pain, vomiting, nausea, that type of stuff. So be careful rock collecting.
I think it's enough. I think it's
Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Even though with this one, I don't see how you could. So ostriches can potentially be very, very deadly. Not in this instance. However, when an ostrich is trying to defend itself, it will oftentimes kick someone. And with the kicking, they oftentimes will use their claws. And believe it or not, an ostrich's claws or talons has the ability to fully disembowel someone if kicked in the stomach. Now the good thing is that ostrich deaths don't really happen much. That being that each year there are only around 2 to 3 attacks that end up ending in serious injury or death in South Africa, and that's just one isolated case. But it is very, very occasional. However, I still would be wary if you are anywhere near an ostrich's feet. This is a great time to revisit Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is only for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Basically, please never drink rubbing alcohol. The main differences between rubbing alcohol and drinking alcohol are that rubbing alcohol uses isopropyl alcohol, while drinking alcohol uses ethanol to get you drunk. Isopropyl alcohol is more potent than ethanol. So technically, both rubbing alcohol and drinking alcohol are poisonous to the human body, but it takes a lot less rubbing alcohol to poison you than it does drinking alcohol. Upon consuming rubbing alcohol, or isopropyl alcohol, you will start to feel very, very intoxicated. But along with that intoxication, you'll also start to, get nauseous, vomit, try to get the alcohol out of your system because your body is seeing it as a poison. This is the same effect that you would have if you drink a lot of drinking alcohol. Hence why alcohol poisoning is still an issue amongst people who drink a lot of alcohol. So let's end this by not making a drinking game out of the amount of times I've said alcohol. I think it's time for another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So earlier this week I was in my forensics class and we had a forensic toxicologist come in. And this man brought up a very, very dangerous drug called carfentanil. Now, if you don't know what carfentanil is, it is a drug that plays a very, very large part in the opioid crisis. And yes, carfentanil is very likely to kill you. That is in large part due to the fact that this opioid is not for human consumption. It is actually a veterinary anesthetic for large animals. And I don't mean like Great Dane large animals, I mean like elephants and rhinoceroses. This stuff is about 10,000 times more potent than morphine, and about 1,000 times more potent than fentanyl. So I just wouldn't mess with this stuff. It's just not worth going to your vet to try to get high. Did you know that boba is technically poisonous? Welcome to Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So yes, boba pearls in their raw form, that is, their uncooked form, is technically poisonous. That is because boba pearls are made of tapioca starch, which comes from the cassava root. I have no idea if I said that incorrectly, but I probably did. And basically, the tapioca starch that comes from this cassava root technically contains cyanide. In fact, on average, the tapioca starch that is consumed by mass amounts of people contain around 0.2 parts per million of cyanide. However, it is important to note that this is a very negligible amount of cyanide, and unless you were eating tons and tons of raw boba pearls, you're not going to really be affected. But if you're a weird author who wants to unalive a character in an interesting way, mass amounts of tapioca starch is the way to go. Did you know your favorite rhubarb pie can actually kill you? Welcome to Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So while it's also a sour treat, rhubarb can actually kill you. Now that is only if you add the leaves to your famous rhubarb pie. That is because rhubarb leaves contain oxalic acid, and whenever you consume large amounts of, rhubarb leaves or oxalic acid, it can actually cause a buildup in your organs. And this buildup of oxalic acid can lead to kidney stones as well as kidney failure, which is not the best side with your rhubarb pie. So since it is about to be the season of pies, please do not use rhubarb leaves in your rhubarb pie. So there's a certain cheese that can kill you. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Yes, you heard me right. There is a cheese that can cause a very slow and painful death, and I'm not talking about on the toilet. The cheese is called casu marzu, and it is a traditional dish in Sardinia, Italy. This cheese is super rare and is also super deadly. Casu marzu is a goat milk-based cheese that, after it is made, is deliberately left out for flies and maggots to lay eggs in and have those eggs hatch. The reasoning behind this is that the people making casu marzu basically want to utilize the maggot's digestive tract in order to make the cheese texture more soft and digestible for humans. However, the deadly part is the maggots themselves, in which after you eat the larvae-infested cheese, basically, the maggots can dig holes in your intestines and leave micro-perforations.
That more than 70 million candies pose a genuine threat to children's lives.
Let's talk about the maggots that are apparently in our candy now. Now, you're probably wondering, how are maggots deadly? And the funniest part is, I just got this video right as soon as I post the video over the casu marzu cheese, which if you don't know what that is, go check out that video. It's basically considered maggot cheese. And just like how it's dangerous with that specific cheese, consuming maggots in any form, in this case in your candies, is extremely dangerous and very deadly. That is because of the fact that maggots eat through a lot of different things, including intestines. So if you consume a maggot, or a lot of maggots at that, they can actually cause minor perforations in your intestinal tract, and it's not a very comfortable thing to go through. So this Halloween season, please check your candy and make sure there are no maggots in it. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. I don't even know why I'm creating this video, other than the fact that for some reason, so many of y'all in my DMs want to consume lava lamps. And I just want to tell you, don't do that, because yes, it can, kill you. Let's just start real quickly with what a lava lamp consists of. So a lava lamp mainly consists of either mineral oil or water and paraffin wax. So the mineral oil or water is the liquid inside of a lava lamp. Meanwhile, the paraffin wax is those little globs that you see going around everywhere. Those alone would make this a very, very not tasty drink. However, whenever it comes to the paraffin wax, what is added to the paraffin wax, oftentimes to add density, thus to make the lava lamp look cooler, is something called carbon tetrachloride. That carbon tetrachloride is the ultimate killer whenever you consume a lava lamp or its contents. Basically, upon initially consuming small amounts of carbon tetrachloride, you're going to be faced with things such as headaches, weakness, lethargy, nausea, vomiting, those types of things. However, consuming large amounts of carbon tetrachloride will result in things such as liver and kidney damage and ultimately death. So while it might look tasty, lava lamps are just not the best option for your dinner choice. So you know about poison dart frogs and that they can kill you, but do you actually know how they can kill you? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So, as we all know, these guys, also known as poison dart frogs, are freaking adorable, but we also know that they are really, really dangerous. That's because these little guys have a chemical in their bodies called batrachotoxin. And if you couldn't tell, batrachotoxin is very deadly. Basically, if you have taken a basic biology course or anything like that, you would know that in each of our cells in the human body, we have sodium channels that will be activated and turned on and off as needed. What happens when batrachotoxin enters your body is it will basically irreversibly open those sodium channels within your nerve cells, and this causes paralysis, which will then cause death. And there is no known antidote to this day. So if you become a dart frog's next victim, I am sorry. If you live in North America and have gotten your landscaping done recently, you might have access to a very, very fast-acting poison. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Today I am talking about gelsomine, which is a molecule and poison that comes from the Gelsemium family of plants. And gelsemium is very, very common in a lot of North American landscaping. So whenever you take a closer look into your backyard and you view this plant, you will see that within its many roots and leaves, there is a chemical called gelsomine. Now, how gelsomine works is it will attack your glycine receptors within your body. That is the receptor that controls neurophysiological functions like respiratory rhythm and your motor skills, and attacking those glycine receptors will cause you to experience nausea, as well as muscle spasms, convulsions, vision impairment, paralysis, and even death. So they might look pretty, but definitely not worth a try. Did you know that bananas can kill you? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Now, before this gets on diet culture TikTok, I do not mean bananas in general can kill you. In moderation, bananas are fine for you unless you are allergic to them. However, if you consume a large amount of bananas or anything else with large amounts of potassium, you could potentially die. So sorry, I had to relocate because my class started, but I'm back. Where did I leave off? Oh yeah, dying. Basically, as you're going about your everyday life, your heart pumping is regulated by something called an electrical conduction system, which basically coordinates what parts of your heart will contract at what times. And whenever you consume large amounts of potassium, that potassium will basically kind of interfere with that electrical conduction system, which causes you to go into cardiac arrest, aka having a heart attack. Now, when this happens, there are ways to counteract cardiac arrhythmias. By cardiac arrhythmias, I mean an abnormal heartbeat, basically, as well as cardiac arrest. And those things are basically treatments like a calcium chloride infusion. There's also the utilization of chemicals such as sodium bicarbonate, and even a mix of dextrose and insulin in water. However, these things are solely used to treat the cardiac arrhythmia itself, and these are not treatments that are used to extract the excess potassium that's still in your body. I did so many calculations to answer this question because someone needs to have their banana bread really badly and I want them to be able to. So here is the answer. You can still eat an entire loaf of banana bread in one sitting, and here's why. Basically, a lethal dose of potassium that is being consumed orally is around 300 milliequivalents. And whenever you take that 300 milliequivalents and take into account potassium, or that you're talking about potassium, the calculation comes out to be around 11,729.4 milligrams. Now, in a basic banana bread recipe, the majority of the time you will have anywhere from 2 to 4 large bananas being used in an entire loaf. And in order to reach that 11,729.4 milligrams of potassium equivalent, which is the lethal dose, like we said earlier, you would need around 24 or 25 bananas. Now, the main issue with potassium overdose doesn't actually come from consuming bananas or consuming potassium orally. It is sadly actually a method of, unaliving oneself through intravenous application, which just basically means it is typically injected whenever that is the goal. And that is because in this case, the dosage level is a lot less. In this case, where the dosage for a lethal dose is around 300 milliequivalents for oral ingestion, the dosage is only around 15 milliequivalents for intravenous or injection dosage. Not to mention, potassium pills are oftentimes used, and those will have a higher concentration of potassium than your basic banana bread. Now, after this video, it is important for me to put a disclaimer. I am not here to tell you to do this or give you a manual on how to do this, because I would never advocate for someone to unalive themselves or other people. However, it is very scientifically interesting and important to note dosage levels whenever you are consuming things versus whether you are injecting them, especially in the world of forensic toxicology as well as other fields such as a pharmacy. However, I do heavily discourage using any of this information for actual use. So keep consuming that banana bread. Let's talk about bioweapons. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So back in 2003, there was a paper that came out talking about another potential bioweapon that the military can use. And in this paper, it was talking about a specific genus of fungi that could be used to create bioweapons. And this genus is called Coccidioides. Now, the reason Coccidioides species are kind of favorable for bioweapons is that, one, they can easily be found in nature, and two, they are very, very inexpensive to grow in a lab. Not to mention, some species of Coccidioides already live in places in the United States, such as California, where it causes something called valley fever, which typically infects the lungs and causes respiratory illness, with symptoms such as cough, fever, chest pain, tiredness. You understand it. Now, this sounds all great and dandy if you're trying to build a different bioweapon, right? Well, kind of. Despite all of these pros of Coccidioides species becoming a form of bioweapon, one of its downfalls is its very long incubation period, which would typically result in the victim becoming asymptomatic or just self-resolving the illness. However, considering what we saw with COVID-19, which was kind of along the same lines as it mainly affected immunocompromised individuals, it could honestly very easily be a COVID-19 2.0. I have another deadly flower to show y'all. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. And today we will be talking about Angel's Trumpet. Angel's Trumpet is a flower that is very predominant in specifically indigenous history, as it has been used for both ritualistic purposes as well as medicine. Did you know that it was once thought that getting tattoos could decrease your lifespan? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Yeah, so after a few morticians found that the majority of their younger bodies had tattoos on them, there was a lot of speculation surrounding the idea that getting tattoos decreased your lifespan. However, this all got debunked back in the 2010s, but you know what could kill you? Not taking care of your tattoo. That's because when you get a tattoo, especially a really huge one like this, that is basically an open wound. It's just a big open wound that you've had tons of needles just pricked into for like 6 hours. And in order for that wound not to get infected with things like sepsis, you basically instantaneously need to cover it as soon as you get it. Hence why you're typically going to have this plastic stuff right here. And the reason you need to cover it is not only does that plastic stuff keep everything out, so all of the pathogens and bacteria and things like that, but it also keeps everything that needs to stay in. That being your bodily fluids, because of the fact that the majority of this is ink, plasma, and blood. And the reason you want to keep those bodily fluids against your tattoo is because it actually promotes healing. You see, hydration of a wound is a big part of the healing process, and a large part of that is because whenever you're healing a wound, your body basically needs water molecules to transport nutrients so that your skin cells, for instance, can start to have those regenerative properties and start to regenerate more skin cells. So take care of your tattoos. You don't want to get sepsis. Can we just talk about a really notable bioweapon real quick? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. This is a plane, and this is something known as DDT, also known as Agent Orange. Agent Orange was a very popular herbicide in the late 1940s and was often used to clear out different areas of high levels of foliage, such as along the side of highways, as well as along the side of railroads, things like that. And whenever the Vietnam War started, US soldiers also used DDT to mitigate foliage on the battlefield so that soldiers of the opposing side had less cover. However, DDT very quickly, fucked everything up. One of the ways that DDT messed everything up is that it defoliated a large portion of Vietnam. So not only was this mass deforestation in Vietnam that, got rid of trees, but also it got rid of a lot of biodiversity in the area, and overall just caused a lot of ecological havoc. Agent Orange also attacked Vietnam in general by causing a large amount of birth defects in the upcoming generation. And we're talking limb deformities, cleft palates, hypothyroidism, structural heart issues. And it didn't only affect Vietnam, it also affected the US soldiers, as a lot of US soldiers were facing different types of cancers, as well as birth defects within their own families. However, it only got banned because of the fact that it was killing off our country's sacred animal. Want to kill off your book character in a really fun way? I got you. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Every single day I get dozens of messages from authors trying to kill off characters in their books in a scientifically accurate way. So what better time to talk about the method that Agatha Christie used in her book The Pale Horse? And that murder method is by using thallium, specifically thallium sulfate. Thallium sulfate is a colorless, odorless, tasteless powder. And it's a really efficient weapon of choice if you want your book character's enemies to have a slow and painful death that can oftentimes be misdiagnosed for other things. That's because thallium sulfate takes a long time to actually start proposing symptoms. In fact, you won't feel symptoms within the first few days. And the actual symptoms range widely. So it's very hard to actually diagnose what the person who has taken thallium sulfate has. After the first few days, victims will oftentimes experience symptoms such as vomiting and nausea. Following that, after about the first week or so, the victim's lower extremities, so like their stomach and below, will start to feel really weird, specifically just a lot of pain. And then the weird symptoms happen after about 2 weeks, in which the victim will experience things such as decreased mobility, as well as hair loss, and just a tingly sensation all throughout their body. By this point, though, it's already too late. And there's not really an effective antidote for thallium poisoning. However, once the victim has passed away, thallium sulfate can be detected by toxicologists via hair. Time to talk about more plants that can kill you. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. This huge flower right here is a plant called foxglove, also known as digitalis. And while absolutely beautiful, this plant also plays a very important role in the heart health market. And that is because this plant contains a lot of chemicals that are typically extracted in order to be used for pharmaceutical drugs that are then used for different sorts of heart conditions. One of which being a chemical called digoxagenin, or DIG, which is a steroid used to make the pharmaceutical drug digoxin. And once created using the foxglove plant, digoxin is basically used to treat heart failure as well as heart rhythm problems. And how digoxin affects your heart is it basically makes it beat more forcefully while also slowing down that heartbeat. Going back to foxglove, because this plant is used to make drugs like digoxin, consuming any part of the plant is extremely deadly, as it's basically a form of giving yourself an unregulated dose of heart medication. So upon consuming any part of this plant, you will most likely receive overdose side effects, like nausea, vomiting, confusion, as well as irregular and slowed down heartbeats, and even things like heart palpitations and fainting. And yes, if you take enough, you can see the afterlife. Welcome to an interesting episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So it's a really huge trend on TikTok to get rid of wasp nests by putting gasoline in a jar and then holding that jar up to the wasp nest. Basically, how this works is the gasoline within the jar will asphyxiate the wasps through the vapors from the gasoline. This causes them to asphyxiate and fall out of the nest, and then you can just really easily slide the jar along the ceiling so that you can get the nest itself. Now, while I would not recommend this method for getting rid of wasps for a number of reasons, gasoline objectively is a very interesting tool in order to unalive something. And gasoline would definitely be an interesting tool if you were to, say, unalive a book character. Basically, let's say you have a character in a book and they go into an enclosed, low ventilation area and ended up being unalived by high levels of gasoline vapors. How that would work scientifically is basically, gasoline is composed of around 150 different chemicals. And these chemicals make the vapors that come from gasoline very dense. In fact, they are denser than air. They are going to cause asphyxiation. Now, it is important to note that a dangerous amount of gasoline vapors is, for one, any amount of gasoline vapors that you are inhaling, but a lethal amount is dependent on a person's size, weight, lung capacity, things like that. Either way, it's not a very smart idea to sniff gasoline. I think it's about time for another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Today we're going to talk about bromo dragonfly, also simply known as dragonfly, which is a very potent hallucinogenic drug. Now, while it's a street drug now, it wasn't always a street drug. Actually, dragonfly was originally invented by researchers in order to test out and study serotonin, as bromo dragonfly works by binding to the serotonin receptors in your body, which helps in creating the hallucinogenic effect it gives off. On top of basically acting as serotonin in the body, bromo dragonfly also acts as an MAOA inhibitor. And if you don't know what an MAOA inhibitor is, the best way to describe it is that antidepressants are also MAOA inhibitors. So it's basically a more potent antidepressant that has a lot of really terrible side effects. Effects such as seizures, agitation, tachycardia, hallucinations, but yeah, and not living on the plane of existence anymore. That being because, one, bromo dragonfly is very under-researched, and two, while it is under-researched, it is also extremely potent. So it is easy to overdose. In fact, the recreational dosage for bromo dragonfly is around 500 to 1,000 micrograms, and while that's the range for the recreational dose, deaths have been reported at around 700 micrograms. So yes, bromo dragonfly can kill you. Sorry for the hiatus, guys. I was moving to my new apartment. But welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. This one comes with a bit of a history lesson. So, back in 1830, a man named Colonel William Sleeman reported a father and son duo who were unalived by poisoners. Because yes, professional poisoners are a thing. Now, it's important to note that Colonel William Sleeman over here is very well known for identifying and dealing with the problem that has to do with this gang of highwaymen in India. And one of the things about this gang is that this gang in India were very used to using a poison called datura on their victims. Now, datura is a genus of plants, and this group of plants within this genus all share kind of the same thing, where they're hallucinogenic, or they're poisonous, or both. And datura can be found all over the world. However, some areas have more poisonous species of datura than others. Now, the majority of datura poisonings occur via ingestion, so you would have to eat it. But if you do, here are the wonderful symptoms that you're going to most likely experience. Dry skin, mucosa, abnormal heartbeat, extremely high fevers, decreased bowel and urinary activity, hallucinations, psychosis, and yes, you can experience death. So basically, pretty flowers just equal a bad trip. This commonly used prescription drug could poison you. Welcome to a long-awaited episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So basically, this prescription drug is called clonidine. And clonidine is a very potent sedative that is often used to treat things like high blood pressure, as well as being used to treat ADHD and even some forms of cancer pain. Now, the details of how this drug works in the body are kind of fascinating, as when you take this medication, it's basically used to change some of the nerve impulses in your brain. Now, the result of changing these nerve impulses involve your blood vessels kind of relaxing, which allows your blood to pass through those blood vessels more easily, thus lowering your blood pressure. Now, it's important to note that this medication is a very potent sedative, as a typical healthy dosage for an adult is only around 0.2 milligrams per day. That's around 0.0025 milligrams per kilogram of body weight for the average adult, which is a very small amount. As in order to hit toxic amounts of clonidine in your body, you would only need 0.2 milligrams of clonidine per kilogram of body weight. Now, if someone does overdose on clonidine, you can experience things like respiratory depression, abnormally low blood pressure, abnormally low heartbeat, hypothermia, drowsiness, coma, and even death. So if you have high blood pressure and take clonidine, also known as Catapress, I would definitely pay very close attention to the dosage you're taking. Stop doing this TikTok food trend immediately. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So there's this TikTok food trend that's been around for a while in which people freeze entire eggs in their shell, crack the shell off, and then slice that frozen egg into little egg slices so they can make mini egg bites. And while this method seems like an easier way to prepare eggs for your kids in the morning, it actually might put them in harm's way. That is because whenever you freeze eggs, they do the same thing as when water freezes, in which as they freeze, they expand. This expansion causes the shell to crack, which can lead to contamination. Specifically bacterial contamination with bacteria like salmonella. As even though the eggs are in the freezer, freezing temperatures do not kill salmonella. So what typically happens in this case is these eggs freeze, they expand, they crack the shell, that shell being their only barrier between them and bacteria. Salmonella then gets into the eggs, and then after preparing the eggs, you and or whoever you serve them to might get food poisoning. Now there is a caveat to this, as salmonella is killed with temperatures reaching around 74 degrees Celsius, also known as 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you properly cook these eggs and have them reach a temperature of around 165 degrees Fahrenheit, you might be safe. However, it is important with this trend to be cautious on that and make sure that you are actually cooking your eggs to completion so that you can kill any potential salmonella that entered the eggs after freezing. So would I recommend doing this trend? Not really, as it can cause food poisoning due to bacterial contamination. However, if you make sure that the eggs reach the temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit via a food thermometer, you will probably be safe. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro was just targeted last night as an arsonist set fire to his house while him and his family was asleep. Now, thankfully, both him and his family escaped safely. However, what would have happened if he didn't? Welcome to a very political episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So whenever it comes to human casualties from fires, whether that be a house fire or a forest fire or anything in between, in most cases, it's not the actual fire that takes people's lives. Instead, it's the toxic fumes that come from the fires that are then inhaled by the people who pass away from them. Most notably, those fumes being carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide. Let's start by talking about what happens when you inhale carbon monoxide. You see, these cage-like structures are what we call hemoglobin, which are proteins in your red blood cells that help you carry oxygen throughout your blood. And it is very good at binding to oxygen. However, there's a chemical that's even better than oxygen at binding to your hemoglobin, and that is carbon monoxide. So what happens when you inhale carbon monoxide is it basically beats the oxygen to your hemoglobin within your blood cells. And as you continue to inhale carbon monoxide and it continues to bind to your hemoglobin, your body will then experience oxygen starvation, in which your tissues will start to become damaged and you will asphyxiate. And if the carbon monoxide doesn't get to you first, we always have hydrogen cyanide, which is a toxic fume that once inhaled inhibits a very necessary protein in your body called cytochrome oxidase. Cytochrome oxidase being an enzyme in your cells that plays an active role in cellular respiration. And what happens when cytochrome oxidase is inhibited is it basically prevents your cells from using oxygen for cellular respiration, which would basically be using oxygen in order to create energy to survive. And when it comes to hydrogen cyanide poisoning, the symptoms are severe, as almost instantly you start to experience different symptoms like nausea, vomiting, seizures, etc., which typically leads to death within minutes. It's now summer, which means it's time to talk about how you can get a one-way ticket to the pearly gates on your next family lake day. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. Let's talk about some brain-eating amoeba. Brain-eating amoebas are basically these little tiny suckers that live in warm, fresh water. And the majority of infections caused by brain-eating amoebas happen like so. A human will typically submerge themselves in a body of fresh, warm water, causing that water to go up their nose and the brain-eating amoeba within that water to thus go up their nose to their brain and cause something called a brain infection. And after contracting this infection, the victim will have to deal with some totally not scary symptoms. You know, like confusion, headaches, light sensitivity, vomiting, a coma, oh yeah, and death. Now, thankfully, if you do get a brain-eating amoeba, there is treatment. And that treatment is a huge pharmaceutical soup of medications that I cannot at all pronounce. And this treatment has allowed for people to survive. So while this is a very scary infection to talk about, don't let it keep you up at night, because on top of having treatment, this is also an extremely rare thing to get, as only around 152 people since 1962 have even contracted this. However, if you do happen to get infected with a brain-eating amoeba, it's completely fine as well, because not only is there treatment, but there's also a good old 3% survival rate. As out of that 152 people, 4 people have survived. Yeah, don't do this. Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. For the past few years, there's been a huge trend of people taking videos of themselves running marathons without having any training. And it is raising a lot of concerns. To start, a marathon is 26.2 miles, which is a lot on the body, especially whenever you're trying to run the entire thing. And because a marathon distance is extremely hard on the body, whether you're running it or even walking it, people like to train for it. Not only because conditioning your body will make you feel better during the run, but also to prevent things like heart attacks. As despite being quite rare, marathons have seen runners fall from heart attacks after the run is over. And the risk for having a heart attack following a marathon increases if you are ill prepared for it. This is because the heart itself is a muscle, and while you're preparing for a marathon, you're not only training all of the other muscles in your body, you're also training your heart to be able to pump more blood without pumping as fast. Which is why track athletes typically will have a lower resting heart rate because of the fact that they've trained their hearts to pump more blood without having to pump as much. However, going back to marathon running, if you run a marathon without conditioning properly beforehand, you might overexert your heart as it's trying to pump enough blood to keep you going. As without conditioning, your heart doesn't have enough strength to pump the amount of blood it needs to get you through the race without pumping way too fast, which then overexerts your heart and causes you to have a heart attack. So, can running a marathon without any training kill you? Yes. Old wives' tales are really popular in mainstream media. However, did you know that our female ancestors also have guides to killing their husbands? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So yeah, historically there have been a lot of ways that women have found to kill their husbands. And today we will be talking about one of them. And it's a little molecule we call aconitine. Now, aconitine comes from the aconite plant, which, funny enough, is considered women's bane. It can also be considered wolf's bane, but women's bane is more applicable to this. And how wives would oftentimes use women's bane is they would actually put it in their husband's food or drink for their husbands to consume. Once their husbands consumed this, the aconitine would go into their system, and they would interfere with specific structures that were meant to pump sodium ions in and out of specific cells within your heart. This would cause a plethora of heart issues and then later on, death. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend pissing off your wife. Have you ever heard of the NyQuil Chicken Challenge? Welcome to another episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. So back in 2022, there was this huge internet challenge that erupted, and it was called the NyQuil Chicken Challenge. And it was basically where you doused a chicken, like an entire raw chicken, in NyQuil and then cooked it. It was kind of one of those challenges that was meant to be disgusting looking and make people question why you're even doing it, but it amassed a ton of virality. And while it amassed a ton of virality, it also amassed a ton of ER visits, as emergency rooms everywhere were reporting a drastic uptick in cold medicine overdoses. Now, to some of you, that makes sense, and to some of you, you're probably wondering how this happened. Well, let me explain. Basically, these people were using liquid NyQuil in order to do this trend. And NyQuil is composed of a ton of different ingredients, such as acetaminophen, dextromethorphan, doxylamine, to name a few. And because it's liquid, it's also composed of water. So when you cook this liquid medication, it's going to do something called reducing, which basically means it's going to lose water and cause the ingredients other than water to become more concentrated. And what's left, which are the ingredients that are used to form NyQuil that I listed earlier, become extremely dangerous because they are in such high dosages. And you don't even have to eat the chicken, because breathing in those cooking fumes can cause you an ER visit as well. So how about let's not participate in dangerous internet challenges? People with ADHD are more likely to die sooner. Welcome to an unexpected episode of Could That Kill Me? Disclaimer, this is solely for educational purposes. Please do not use any of these methods to do anything illegal on my behalf. It has been a long time since we did a Could That Kill Me video, and this is an interesting one. As there was this paper that was published back in August of 2019, and it begged to ask the question, is ADHD associated with premature death? And fun fact, the answer is yes. As these researchers analyzed the Swedish register data of 86,670 individuals that had ADHD, and from this data they found that those with ADHD actually do have a higher risk of premature death. And it's all due to something called psychiatric comorbidity. Psychiatric comorbidity being an incident where someone experiences both mental and physical deterioration as a result of a mental condition. And the researchers in this study even found that early onset psychiatric comorbidity was associated with death due to more natural causes, in contrast to those with late onset psychiatric comorbidity, which were seen to be associated with deaths that were more unnatural in nature, including causes like unintentional injury and even unaliving oneself. Oh, how wonderful it is to be neurodivergent.